Hi, my name is Keith Slider, and I would like to talk to you about my final assignment, which is climigration and its implications. What is climigration? Climigration is mass migration of populations due to climate change. It is a common climate adaptation strategy that results in managed retreat and managed population displacement. Climigration may enable communities to eventually adapt if planned properly. However, regardless of positive adaptation, there are huge implications to the population displacement, which includes disparity, mental health concerns, public health concerns, displacement of extended families, and the loss of economic power of vulnerable populations and small businesses. Now, American coastal areas of particular concern include areas in Florida and Texas, which are located to the south of the United States map. Cities and counties in these areas have been the recipient of continual flooding due to the rising sea levels, tropical storms, and hurricanes associated with climate change. 40% of the U.S. populace live within the coastal counties, which averages out to approximately 461 people per square mile. Now, because there is no common definition of what actually constitutes a coastal region or a coastal area, estimates of coastal populations vary. Most coastal areas historically measured are based on an average of approximately 60 to 200 kilometers of the shoreline and may include coastal floodplains and coastal forests known as mangroves, marshes and tide flats, and beaches, dunes, and coral reefs. According to NOAA data from 1970 to approximately 2010, the population in the coastal counties increased to about 34.8 million people. Again, that is approximately 40% of the U.S. populace. Climigration has huge and devastating implications for communities, including mental health, public health concerns, the loss of economic stability and power. It also creates extended grief and trauma through sudden death or sudden and uncontrolled life changes. Entire community economies and infrastructures are impacted by climate change and climigration. The cost of climigration is enormous. For example, the cost to rebuild are so enormous that the working class and the working poor seldomly return to these areas. Approximately 40% of the coastal populations are financially and socially vulnerable. A lot of the families that participate in climigration are automatically displaced from their extended families. In other words, grandmother and grandfather are no longer a part of their immediate households, and if they lived in an assisted living or nursing facility near their children, they may no longer be as near their adult children and grandchildren due to limited licensed facilities and their availability. We shouldn't overlook the sight of a familiar face of a neighbor when going through a crisis like this. These friendly faces help us to cope with the reality of such a trauma. Mental health is one of the most overlooked side effects of climigration. Climigants often are able to bring a little with them apart from the mental health problems created by the environmental changes and their threats to health and well-being. These displacement poses a threat to the public mental health of each climigrant. Those mental health diagnoses are known as eco-anxiety, eco-paralysis, and solastalgia, which is something that young people are reportedly especially vulnerable to these types of mental ailments. It may also cause complex grief, sickness, depression, among others. Individuals who are displaced due to climate migration have a recognizable increase in suicide rates, especially those with dramatic losses, such as the loss of a business and the death of a loved one due to the extreme weather events. Individuals with the loss of a business Coupled with that loss, including public health, including the relocating of hospitals, clinics, and other ancillary medical supports, poses a serious concern for populations. Even more importantly, the loss of these facilities will render communities vulnerable to public health crises. Changes in the size, composition, distribution of human populations affect coastal regions by changing land use and land cover. Fishing or harvesting, the destruction of mangroves, and pollution and sedimentation from human activities all can affect the coastal environment. Even the sudden migration from the coastal area has a huge impact on the loss of economic power. Now, climate change translates into huge financial losses in the coastal areas. Tourism, fishing, agriculture, aquaculture are major industries within the coastal area that are typically impacted. Coastal communities from Maine to California have been put on notice from one of the top credit rating agencies. Start preparing for climate change or risk losing access to cheap credit. Climigration, whether managed or unmanaged, tends to favor people with greater financial means because of moving is costly and often involves changes to employment, schools, medical services, child and elder care options. Emphasis should be placed on shoring up local economies by providing local populations jobs within their public services to provide a sense of visible community and returning back to normalcy. Despite growing risks from sea level rises, storm surges, and more frequent hurricanes, there's still a tendency towards business as usual approach, particularly in the relation to expensive coastal estates sales market. In other words, affluent Americans are still flooding coastal areas to exploit low costs of flood damaged properties and properties abandoned and packaged for real estate foreclosure and tax sales, while the poor relocate to wherever they can afford to climate, even if it's across the country. Climigration is the forced migration of population due to climate change. Even though it is a secondary effect of climate change, it has huge implications for communities, including mental and public health concerns and the loss of economic stability and power.